There's something chilling about a voice on tape. When you hear a man calmly talking about murder, mocking the police, and promising to kill again, it gets under your skin. In the late 1970s, Britain was gripped by fear. Women were being brutally murdered across the north of England. The newspapers were splashed with screaming headlines, and the police were locked in a desperate hunt for a killer. But then, out of nowhere, came a voice. A smooth northeast accent, confident, cruel. He called himself Jack. He taunted detectives, claimed responsibility for the murders, and told them he'd never be caught. And here's the thing, the police believed him. That voice didn't belong to the Yorkshire Ripper, but for years it convinced some of the most experienced investigators in the country. It sent them down the wrong path, let the real killer keep murdering, and became one of the most infamous hoaxes in British criminal history. Tonight, we're diving into the extraordinary story of Wearside Jack, the man who pretended to be a serial killer and got away with it for decades. To understand just how devastating this hoax was, we have to rewind to the 1970s, to a Britain on edge. Between 1975 and 1980, a man named Peter Sutcliffe, later known as the Yorkshire Ripper, terrorized the north of England. His victims were women, many of them sex workers, and his attacks were vicious. He bludgeoned and stabbed his victims, leaving communities in places like Leeds, Bradford, Manchester, and beyond absolutely paralyzed with fear. The press went wild. Police were under extraordinary pressure. This was one of the biggest manhunts the country had ever seen. Sutcliffe's first known murder was that of Wilma McCann in 1975. She was a mother of 4, killed in Chapeltown, Leeds. Over the next 5 years, he'd go on to murder 13 women and attack at least 7 others. The sheer brutality of his crimes and the randomness of some of his victims made the public feel that no one was safe. By 1978, the investigation was sprawling. Tens of thousands of people had been interviewed, mountains of evidence were piling up, and still no arrests. That's when a letter arrived. The first letter came to Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield, one of the men leading the investigation. It was postmarked Sunderland. In shaky, uneven handwriting, the writer claimed to be the Yorkshire Ripper. He mocked the police for failing to catch him and hinted at future killings. Oldfield, already under immense strain, took the letter seriously. Then another letter came, then another, and finally a cassette tape. The tape changed everything. On it, a man with a thick Wearside accent from the northeast of England calmly addressed Oldfield directly.
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George. But Lord, you are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started. I reckon your boys are letting you down, George. They can't be much good, can they?
The voice had a strange, almost smug tone. It was flat, deliberate, and eerily confident. He went on to taunt the investigation, even predicting another attack. It was theatrical, chilling, and it got under Oldfield's skin like nothing else. The letters and tape were quickly dubbed the Wearside Jack communications, and for the detectives working the Ripper case, they became gospel. Experts analyzed the handwriting, the language, and most importantly, the accent. Linguists pinpointed it to Sunderland or nearby. This was a game changer. Suddenly, the police shifted their massive investigation northeast. They poured time, money, and manpower into looking for a suspect from Wearside. Every other lead that didn't match that voice started to matter less. And that was catastrophic. Because while detectives were focusing on Sunderland, Peter Sutcliffe was living in Bradford. He wasn't from Sunderland. His accent was West Yorkshire, not Wearside. And every day the focus stayed on that tape, Sutcliffe stayed free. This wasn't a little misdirection. It derailed the manhunt. Tens of thousands of men were eliminated as suspects simply because their voices didn't match the hoaxer's voice. In fact, Sutcliffe himself had been interviewed by police multiple times and dismissed partly because he didn't sound like Wearside Jack. The hoax gave him cover to keep killing. Behind the scenes, not everyone was convinced. Some detectives argued that the letters and tape didn't quite fit the killer's known behavior. Forensic linguists raised doubts, and then there was the forensic evidence. Semen samples from the crime scenes didn't match anything linked to the hoaxer. But the pressure on Oldfield was immense. He believed that voice was real. In press briefings, the public were told the Ripper had a Sunderland accent. It was broadcast on television. People started phoning in tips about anyone they knew from Wearside who sounded like the man on the tape. The psychological effect of that tape was enormous. It made the public feel like the killer was right there, smugly laughing at them. But in reality, it was a cruel, practical joke, a fake. Let's talk about the man behind the hoax. His name was John Humble. He was from Sunderland, born in 1956, and he wasn't a criminal mastermind. In fact, he was an ordinary man with a troubled background. In 1978, when he recorded that tape and sent those letters, he was drinking heavily and living a fairly aimless life. Later, he claimed he did it partly out of boredom, partly out of frustration at the police, and partly because he wanted attention. That voice that sounded so chilling and calculating on the tape, it came from a man sitting in his bedroom, slurring slightly through drink, pretending to be a serial killer. Meanwhile, Sutcliffe continued his reign of terror. In 1979, after the hoax tape had been released, he murdered Josephine Whittaker in Halifax. In 1980, he killed again, several times. The hoax didn't just delay justice, it cost lives. And to this day, that fact casts a long shadow over the case. Eventually, in January 1981, Peter Sutcliffe was caught by sheer chance. He was stopped by two police officers in Sheffield while with a sex worker. They discovered false number plates on his car, arrested him, and soon after linked him to the murders. When he confessed, the truth was devastating. He wasn't from Sunderland. He never sent those letters. The so-called Wearside Jack was a fake. For detectives who had spent years chasing the wrong accent, it was a gut punch. Oldfield, who had so passionately believed in the hoax, was devastated. He'd been led down a path by a man with a cassette recorder and a cruel sense of humor. Some officers privately said they never forgave themselves for the lives lost during that crucial misdirection. But here's the twist. While Sutcliffe was caught and imprisoned, Wearside Jack disappeared back into the shadows. For decades, nobody knew who had sent those letters and that tape. They'd been examined, studied, even ridiculed in documentaries, but the sender remained anonymous. Some people assumed he'd been arrested for something else. Others thought he might have died. The case went cold. Then, in the early 2000s, forensic science changed everything. By this time, DNA profiling had advanced dramatically. Police had kept the original letters and envelopes in storage, and in 2005, cold case detectives decided to revisit them using modern techniques. They extracted saliva DNA from the seal of one of the envelopes, and there it was, a full DNA profile. It matched a man who was already on the police database, John Samuel Humble. At the time of the match, Humble was 49 years old. He was living quietly in Sunderland, and when police knocked on his door, he didn't exactly put up a fight. They found recordings of the Wearside Jack tape in his home. They found an old typewriter similar to the one used to type some of the hoax letters, and they found the same accent, that distinctive Wearside tone. Humble was arrested and charged with perverting the course of justice. During interviews, he admitted to sending the letters and the tape. He claimed he'd been drunk when he did it. He said he didn't realize how much harm he had caused. But the harm was incalculable. In court, prosecutors laid it out clearly. John Humble's hoax fundamentally altered one of the largest criminal investigations in British history. It gave a serial killer more time to kill, it destroyed trust, and it tormented the families of the victims. He pled guilty, and in March 2006, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. 8 years for a hoax that helped a murderer evade capture for years. For many, that sentence felt like a slap on the wrist. Humble served part of his sentence and was released in 2009. He kept a low profile after that, living quietly in the northeast. But the story didn't end there. In March 2019, he was found dead at his flat in South Shields. He'd lived alone, largely isolated, and had battled years of alcohol abuse and health problems. Official reports stated that he died from heart failure, likely linked to his long-term drinking. He was 63 years old. When the news broke, it barely made the front pages. The man who had once held an entire country in the palm of his hand with just a tape recorder and a cruel imagination died quietly, with no ceremony, no crowd, no infamy left to cling to. But his hoax never was. The Wearside Jack letters and tape became infamous. They were studied in criminology courses, used in documentaries, and referenced in discussions about how easily investigations can be thrown off track by misinformation. His voice is still burned into the memory of many people who lived through that terrifying time. In fact, if you listen to the tape today, it's hard not to shudder. The fake Yorkshire Ripper, with his calm delivery and smug words, became as much a part of the legend as the real killer. And perhaps that's what makes this story so chilling. A single man, armed with nothing more than a tape recorder, a pen, and an envelope, managed to influence the course of one of the biggest manhunts in British history. It shows how fragile investigations can be, how one convincing lie can warp an entire narrative. The impact of the Wearside Jack hoax was profound. It led to new protocols around how evidence is evaluated in major investigations. In modern policing, multiple strands of evidence, forensic, behavioral, geographic, linguistic, all are cross-checked to avoid tunnel vision. Back in 1979, that wasn't the case. When the accent seemed to match the letter, it became the investigation's compass. And that compass pointed the wrong way. But let's step back and look at the personal tragedy behind this. George Oldfield, the detective who championed the Wearside Jack theory, suffered immense public criticism after Sutcliffe's arrest. His health deteriorated, and he died in 1985, never fully recovering from the professional and personal weight of the case. The victims' families endured years of terror and frustration. Women across Yorkshire lived in fear because of a real killer and a fake voice. Forensic science eventually exposed John Humble, but not before the damage was done. His DNA on the envelope was like a ghost reaching out from the past, and it was fitting in a way that the same science that eventually proved Sutcliffe's guilt also unmasked the man who had pretended to be him. Humble's guilty plea brought some closure, but not justice in the way many might have hoped. No sentence could undo the years lost or the lives taken because the police were listening to the wrong voice. When he stood in the dock, some observers noted how ordinary he looked. Not like the menacing voice on the tape, just a grey, middle-aged man with a tired face. After his death, no one came forward to claim his body for several days. It was an almost poetic ending for a man who had sought notoriety in the most twisted way. A voice once amplified across Britain, silenced in solitude. The Wearside Jack story is a powerful reminder of how truth can be twisted, how fear can be amplified, and how even the best-intentioned investigations can go catastrophically wrong when the wrong piece of evidence takes center stage. It's also a testament to the power of science. DNA didn't just solve murders, it solved a hoax. Today, the voice of Wearside Jack still echoes in true crime history. It's a lesson carved deep into the fabric of British policing. Never again will a single accent or a single piece of evidence be allowed to dominate so completely. That tape, once a source of terror, now stands as a warning. John Humble didn't kill anyone, but his actions helped a killer walk free for far too long.
And in doing so, he became a kind of villain in his own right. Not because he wielded a hammer, but because he wielded a lie. As the years pass, the Yorkshire Ripper case continues to haunt Britain. But alongside Sutcliffe's name, there's another name, Wearside Jack, forever tied to the story. A hoax to fool a nation, a voice that wasn't what it seemed, a reminder that sometimes the monster isn't who we think it is. Thank you for joining me on Murmurs of Crime. If this story chilled you, if it made you think twice about what lurks just beneath the surface of our collective consciousness, then please hit like, subscribe, and share, as it will help my new channel grow. And please do drop a comment below naming a case you think deserves its own episode, or to continue discussion on this case, I read and reply to all comments. I'll see you again very soon. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and never stop listening for the murmurs of crime. Bye for now.